For a long time, I felt like sensorimotor OCD was going to ruin my life. It was something that really kind of popped up out of the blue. I was really unsuspecting. I'd been struggling with a lot of rumination and anxiety. I'd also been struggling with OCD, but I didn't realize it at that time. However, as I began to experience sensorimotor OCD for the first time, it was something that was so much harder to deal with than anything else that I'd been experiencing. I think part of the reason for why sensorimotor OCD can be so difficult is that it's always potentially there with you. Other types of OCD, perhaps when you perform the compulsion, you might momentarily feel a bit better. You might actually get some relief from all of the anxiety. But with sensorimotor, there's no really getting away from it. I was really struggling with obsessions about the mouth, about swallowing, about my teeth. I was also struggling with obsessions about breathing. And all of these things were so difficult. It was very uncomfortable when these sensations would come in because they were the only thing that I could think about. There was this kind of belief that if I didn't solve or fix the sensorimotor awareness of these things, that I was always going to be experiencing it and that it would actually ruin my life. And actually, it did for a long, long time. This is something, that I really kind of developed around the age of 18. And I didn't even realize that it was a kind of form of OCD until I was in my early 30s. And so, this was obviously something that I found incredibly difficult to deal with. When I did realize it was OCD, I started to do things like trying to learn about, obviously, exposure work. But exposure, it seemed quite obvious to me what I had to do when it came to, things like hand washing OCD, for example, or even pure OCD, where, ideally you would learn to stop ruminating because that is often the main compulsion with that. But when it came to sensorimotor, it was very difficult for me to figure out what the exposure would actually be because, I was struggling with the obsessions all day long. It was something that when I woke up in the morning, it was there and it kind of felt like it was going to be there all day. So how can you do exposure for that? And so, of course, over time, this really built up. I kind of felt this pressure that it was always going to be there. It was going to ruin my life. And it was horrible. If you're struggling with sensorimotor or somatic OCD yourself, then my heart really goes out to you because I know just how difficult it can be when you're struggling with this. Healthline states that somatic OCD, also known as sensorimotor OCD, is a type of OCD in which the obsessions revolve around somatic or physical symptoms. Typically, the focus is on automatic bodily functions and processes such as blinking, breathing, or moving. Now, what tends to happen is these things previously, of course, were just happening in the background. They weren't things that you would be thinking about. They certainly weren't things that would make you anxious. But one of the problems with sensorimotor OCD is once you become aware of that and your anxiety attaches to these physical, normal kind of physical processes, you kind of tell yourself, right, now that I'm aware of that, I'm not going to be able to not be aware of it. And it's always now going to give me anxiety. I'm going to be stuck with this. And so, of course, what happens is you kind of go round in circles. You're constantly checking to try to make sure that you're still not aware of the obsession. But, in doing that, you're actually keeping yourself aware of it. And it's this really vicious cycle where it doesn't matter what you do. You're constantly aware of it. And actually, the more you try to fix it by, researching it or thinking about it from different perspectives or angles or, trying to distract yourself in various ways, often that just ends up making the situation worse with sensorimotor OCD. And I think this is another reason for why it can be so frustrating and so difficult to deal with. Sensorimotor OCD or somatic OCD can include some of the typical things that I struggled with, like breathing or swallowing, but it can also go on to blinking, onto body movements, even onto bladder movements, all sorts of different things that sensorimotor OCD can actually really get stuck on, and it can cause so much anxiety for the people who are struggling with it. So with this in mind, I wanted to create a series of videos that are really all about sensorimotor OCD, looking at the different types, looking at how it works, and of course, looking at some approaches that can be really helpful in learning how to overcome it, learning how to manage it. I think quite frustratingly, sensorimotor OCD is one of those subtypes that isn't really spoken about enough. And actually, I don't think there is enough information about it out there at all. It seems that a lot of people really don't understand how it functions and how it works. Certainly from my own experience of dealing with lots of different types of OCD, I think sensorimotor was the most difficult one to deal with, the most persistent one to deal with. And so I think it's really important that we recognize that. And that's part of the reason for why I wanted to make this video today, and actually why I plan to make a series of videos about sensorimotor OCD. So that I can actually provide you with more information about my own personal story with this and how I've learned to deal with it and overcome it, but also to share more information in general about the different types of sensorimotor OCD, and of course the different ways that you can learn to manage it more effectively. So I really hope that you found this video helpful, and please do subscribe. There will be weekly videos now coming out about sensorimotor OCD. So I look forward to sharing this journey with you. Many thanks. This video is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are dealing with OCD, anxiety, or any mental health concerns, please consult a licensed mental health professional for support.